and welcome. I'm Caroline Baldwin from The Caterer, and I'm delighted to have you all here today and to host this fantastic panel. If you have any burning questions throughout the discussion, keep hold of those. We'll be turning to audience questions in about half an hour or so. We welcome all your questions. So let's kick off with a quick fact check. So, a term coined in May 2021 was the concern about the Great Resignation. According to PwC, 1 in 5 workers globally try to quit this year. So I'd like to get a sense check from the panel whether you're still witnessing some truth from this statement and whether attracting and retaining talent is still a growing trend to combat this issue. Linda, I wonder if you could maybe kick us off there.
Yeah, sure. Was the Great Resignation a reality? Yes. However, I think it was a case of it being concentrated, because it doesn't mean to say that people before the pandemic were not thinking of leaving. It's just that during the pandemic, the people who were thinking of leaving probably held onto their seats, either were actively employed or were furloughed, therefore getting some, even if it was 80% salary. And therefore, I think it was a case of there was that tsunami then, where all of a sudden people thought, right, okay, I've been waiting 2 years to do this, in it goes. And you've had probably 3 years accumulation of people who were looking to leave. So I think it was a reality, and it was a challenge for organisations as to sort of what to do. I mean, just to give you an anecdote, I was speaking to another professional body this week, and 50% of their staff have left in the last 3 months. And that is staggering for any organisation to have to cope with when you're trying to get on with business, etc., and all of a sudden 50% of your staff handing their notice. And I don't think we will know until maybe 10 years' time the true impact on this pandemic on each and every single person, young, old, and everybody in the middle, etc., what that's done to our psychology, our own DNAs, etc. So,
you said the word psychology, so I'm going to turn to Ali, the specialist here. What do you, how do you feel in terms of that? There's some ringing some truth there. Do you agree with Linda?
I do. If you look over the last 2 years, we've heard a lot about the great this and the quiet that. It's gone from, everything from quiet quitting to quiet firing. And it's not really that quiet when the numbers start speaking as loud as, our the market's telling us. For me, more interestingly, I think you have to dig into the why, what's causing a lot of these factors. And we know Gen Z don't feel as passionate about work as the millennials, for example. We have to start to understand what employee experience means for different people.
So in terms of getting that balance right, working from home versus working in the office has clearly been quite a contentious topic that I think some businesses are starting to learn how to deal with that, and it's been quite an issue, and it's obviously top of employees' agendas to understand where they need to be to do their job. Are we starting to get that balance right, do you think? And is this new normal working out? And are companies that are pushing back on this seeing their talent leaving? Is it that black and white in terms of things like that? Maybe Linda, you could just take that one again. I think that from your Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management position.
I think what we've got to remember is that we are in a period of chaos, and we're in a period of great experimentation. If I hear any companies if any of those boards say, oh, can't wait to get back to pre-COVID times, they probably will not exist, because the world wasn't great before COVID. We need a different world, and we need different models, we need a different way to do business, and most importantly, and I hear what we say about people in different boxes and different generations. At the end of the day, there's one thing we can all say we are, and that's human. I mean, therefore, we need to be recognised, each and every person individually as a human being. So I have a loathing of the expression hybrid, as if it's, oh, in the office or at home. Well, surely a person has tasks to do in order to do their work. Where is the best place for that person to do it? Because it might not be home, actually, because they might be living in an abusive relationship. And therefore, to go to work is a safety net. There might be people who've got, obviously, elderly families, elderly parents and what have you, and therefore it's right for somebody to be at home, to be on hand, to sort of check in on them, and therefore to work from home is good. But every single person every day wants to be valued, wants to do their best work, and therefore organisations have got to work very, very, very closely with all individuals, because there's no one size fits all, there's no silver bullets here. The world has changed. And if I use an example of, say an organisation had 19 offices throughout the UK, say that organisation had 9,000 employees, they didn't have 19 workplaces, and they've got 9,000 workplaces. So how are those workplaces being managed? How are those workplaces conducive to a person doing their best work? Because every person wants to do a good job at the end of the day.
Claire, what's your thoughts on this side of things from a Sodexo's perspective?
I think, excuse me, I think the workforce are individuals. I think we look at them very holistically and consider that they're a body of beings, but actually what they are is a group of individuals that want individual things, because guess what? Their life is very different. And when you're looking at a sustainability perspective, even that is very individual. So some people really focus on carbon, others very much focus on the social aspects and the fundraising, the volunteering. So as an employer, we have to be very flexible within our needs to be able to access the different needs of our workforce.
No, it's very clear. Humans clearly have different wants and needs, and not putting them into boxes is the way we need to go forward. So moving on to talking about those different wants and needs, some of the three biggest challenges associated with remote working, I think they were up on the board a second ago, but to remind you, was unplugging after work, loneliness and communication. So clearly, whether you're working in an office, working in a coffee shop, or working from home, I think the whole world has, mental health is suffering right now. It's been a hell of a couple of years. Looking towards young workers, apparently they are the most vulnerable at the moment. Amidst rising inflation, crippling student debt, unaffordable housing, rounds of layoffs, lingering pandemic, and a looming recession. Crikey, that's a cheery list for you. Let's move on from that. But that's a heck of a list, and many young workers have reached breaking point and having to deal with that, as well as we were talking about the boomers versus the zoomers, and manage all of that. I don't even know where you start. So I'm going to ask you guys. In your videos, you mentioned that health, relationship management, skills, they're all the big challenges that need to be faced. And I'd love to share with the audience some examples of any companies that you're seeing that are addressing this health and productivity management. Ali, you and I chatted a little bit about this beforehand. Maybe you can share some thoughts on it.
I think a number of companies are trying to do their best in their own way. And we also have a regulatory-driven approach. If you look at countries like Japan, for example, where health and productivity management is a vernacular at the government level. They are incentivizing organizations to make sure that they're looking after their employees by law. So they go through a discovery process to understand where the employees are at, and then they provide the personalized interventions, specifically the health perspective. Productivity is quite a difficult bag, because how do you measure fooditude that's manufacturing fundamentally food to eat versus somebody that's delivering emails? You have to find a comparable way to try to do that. So we're doing some work in pioneering just things like that. On the other side, 2014, I think it was when, it was 2012, I believe, if somebody wants to look this up, I could stand corrected. Late found and prevention law in Germany came to life, where they said organizations more than 250 people were going to need to be incentivized, and actually they they taxed them heavily if they didn't offer well-being services for employees in particular. So organisations, I think, that have been on this journey, massively different responses we're seeing, where in our data set we're seeing organisations do want to do this, not really sure how, what priority, and more importantly also, what impact they're going to get back. What's the ROI of doing this at a people level, at a reputation level, a brand level as well. So quite a big, lot of things to pack in there.
Definitely. James, I'd love to bring you in here. Have you got any examples or any sectors that you think that are doing this quite well potentially?
I think everyone's really trying to do this really well, and I think it's now really drifting into lots of other sectors that you wouldn't usually imagine. So, food and drink is just one of the best catalysts for engagement of people. Breaking bread with people, sitting around a table, having the conversations, a water cooler moment does actually exist. And we can't lose sight of that. And that's the great power of food and drink. And I think it's, to my comment, the conversation and the narrative has changed. It's not about cost, it's around, value of experience. And I don't think you can put a cost to that value of experience to get people to communicate better, to help their well-being. And I think Ali's got some great, thoughts around how you can actually measure that and manage that. And I think, manufacturing organisations are now taking that plunge into the free issue element of enticing people back into the workplace by giving them that incentive. And what a great time to do it in this current financial crisis. It's somewhere to be with your friends and your colleagues. To talk and enjoy food. I think, it's moving into other sectors, which is really promising. And it's not a huge cost. It's an opportunity cost, and not a real financial cost. And we can't lose sight of that opportunity cost.
I definitely remember that first water cooler moment post-COVID in the office when things were still a bit hairy, and you're like, oh, this is why we're doing it. Yeah. This makes sense. Claire, from a social side of your job role and the sustainability side of things, how important are these issues in terms of expanding into inclusion and diversity to avoid people leaving, say, London as a massive centre that we need everybody in this city, and pushing people out, but encouraging people back into the office, and there's a lot in there, and I don't think we've got a lot of time to unpick it. But where do you sit when it comes to that?
Well, I didn't want to add something to your list, but there's climate anxiety as well, and that's impacting on mental well-being. There's a feeling of powerlessness. Is that a word? Powerlessness? It's my word now. I've coined it. But we would have seen COP26, and then we've recently come out of COP27, and it was just less prevalent this time round. It just wasn't felt. We didn't have Boris in sort of commanding that ship, and it wasn't felt as much. And people feel like climate change is absolutely massive, and I know that there's going to be some more impacts, and we've seen that this year. Lots of disasters this year. How, as an individual, can I impact on it? So that mental well-being piece is something that has to be considered much more holistically. But from an inclusion perspective, demographic profiling is really key to this. So understanding the local communities that your workforce live, work, and play. Because we cannot make sweeping assumptions. Knowing the demographic profile of the community means that you start to understand what the big challenges are, what the diversity is of those demographies, how they like to socialise, how they like to interact. But you do that, and that's through the data. There's data and insights that drive that. And then what do you want to do with that data? So it's probably less around London. It's more around actually where are your workplaces? How does the levelling up strategy play into that? How does the infrastructure that we're starting to see the government's investing in play into that? So again, it's less about trying to get back into London or trying to get back into the workplaces that we already have, more about actually how do we adapt to everything that's playing out. And don't forget to adapt to climate change, because if we don't adapt, then the impact is significant.
And moving on a little bit further into the food side of things, because that is the reason we are all here after all, it fascinates me when I think back to the Silicon Valley when all those tech startups were kicking off, and Google had slides in their offices and all those crazy things to probably make people feel better about working there 24/7. And you had the anecdotal ping pong table in a gaming room, 5 years ago that was going a bit dusty. Now it feels that the current climate requires yoga studios and office gyms and designated quiet spaces. And obviously food comes into this as well, and this whole wellness trend. So from looking at food from a wellness perspective, is that a trend that is definitely still here to stay, Ali? What's your thoughts there?
Just so you know, the reason why I'm being asked is because one of my party tricks is I'm also the director of research of what has become the largest mental health study of its kind in the world in the insurance industry. So you've probably heard of a big or maybe a small insurer called AXA. So we ran a study, and actually, interestingly, we'll be publishing some results on eco-anxiety amongst young people in the 4 million data points we've just collected from 16 countries this year, normatively sampled across the population set, is not lying. It's telling us some amazing insights. And yeah, look, I think the role of how people think about the office has just changed dramatically in the last 1 or 2 years. What I want to do when I go to the office versus what somebody else in my team might want to do. Hotelification, is it a thing? Not for everybody, but for some it absolutely is. Can you create an environment where people can have those serendipitous conversations, and where does food play a role within that? Absolutely, it will do. We've all got to eat. We've got different requirements as well. So I think across the board, when I think about the experiences of companies we're speaking to, we're trying to find a data-driven way to help them understand empirically where they are, and everybody's different. We're very early stage. We're trying to find the trends that are going to help them understand, A, where they're at, but where does it go next? What's that North Star that they're trying to achieve, and what trajectory are they on? And that's a really, really hard thing to predict. But I think companies can do it if they work hard at it.
Linda, what are your thoughts here?
Food is immensely important, because we need it every day to sustain ourselves. But I think the most interesting thing, currently, from organisations, but particularly when you look at young people and trying to attract talent, it's a case of you can't just say, oh, there's free food here, and you sort of pile up sort of cheap food, and people can come in and sort of have what they like, and there's not that golden thread back to where that original ingredient came from, because the young people, they've had much better education. I hate to say it, everybody, but than most of us have had in the room, etc. No, but they have. This has been part of their DNA at school and what have you, and so they've heard all this, and certainly they will pick up on it on sort of, the programs that we sort of do see on mainstream television, and they will connect with it much quicker than we will connect with it, because it wasn't in our DNA when we were going through the education system. So they will not want to see a pile of cheap food, which might fill them up, but they will be thinking, but where's that come from? And what's the waste? What's the waste here? And we're great, as an Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, great supporters of RAP, etc. We cannot have a world where people are starving. Good to see Stop Hunger and what have you, and I know Sodexo are brilliant supporters of that. You cannot have a world where you've got hunger, and I heard a statistic 2 weeks ago, 44% of bread that is produced every single day in the United Kingdom is binned. How is that even conceivable in this day and age? So are we just growing, they've got the wheat basket in Ukraine, you've got a war in Ukraine, we've been told about, we're going to have shortage of food, and yet we're binning 44% of bread, a mainstay of the British diet and what have you. So young people will pick up on that, and it is young people who will want to choose where they work in the future. And therefore food has a hugely important part, whether you are giving it for free, or you're subsidising it, or the message and the purpose of your own organisation, where that young person thinks, I want to work here because I believe in the ethos of this company. So lots of, it's difficult for companies to get their head around all of this.
We'll come back to the
Yeah.
sustainability and the waste side in a moment, but I just want to bring James in at this point. Your thoughts as a food consultant about tempting people back into the office. It's not about tempting now, it's about giving what they deserved, and
Yeah.
equally, does it average out the cost of the commute to young people nowadays? How are people thinking about it from a food consultant perspective, but also how are your clients receiving that?
I think the clients are really realizing that it's very difficult. I think Alex pointed out, we're tasked with delivering a lot and almost too much. And I think it's now changed. And I think that's been driven by some of the high street to say, do less but better. Absolutely nail what you do and make it the best experience you possibly can. And that will attract people to come in. So fish and chips on a Friday, I mean, everyone does it, but why not make it the absolute best and people will pay for it? People will be going out less. That's absolutely clear through what's going on. But they won't mind spending it on a better experience, and they're prepared to do that. And the younger demographic know what good food is. They really absolutely do, and it has to have that thread. It has to have the thread of provenance, you know, the sustainability element, the seasonality element, and that's part of the package. You know, it's a huge, bigger thing. But you know, my clients are saying, do less but better, and that seems to be drawing people in. There's an occasion to actually go in for, not just it's the same thing absolutely every day. There's a real occasion. It becomes a celebration of a particular day part that then draws people all together.
Brings people together, start having a collaboration,
Totally.
becomes emotive.
Yeah, it's so emotive food.
Yeah. And there were stats, wasn't there, about people are coming into cities less, but when they are coming in, they're treating themselves to that
They are.
lunch rather than bringing the packed lunch.
Yeah.
Whether that continues into that looming recession or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But that sounds positive so far. So giving that quality at the beginning is really important.
And I think it is working. It absolutely is working.
And how about other experiences, tying in, that's why I brought in the ping pong tables and the slide. Where are people pushing food to, you know, really experiential sides of things? I think we're going to see some experiences later this evening, but where do you draw the line, and where do people care, and is that worth investing in, I suppose?
Yeah, it is. I think food can be done. There's so many different things you can do with food to get that experience. I think, you know, partly is, you know, attracting younger people is going to be really important, and a lot of clients are supporting, educating younger people within, you know, their teams how to cook, because a lot of young people just don't know what to do with the ingredients. They know what good food tastes like, but they've no idea how it got there. Absolutely no idea at all. So I think there's a real education, and clients are starting to understand it, to make that connection, and therefore it's far more appreciated and far more valued. So I think that's another part of that experience of food that will help people come into the workspace. Yeah, and just having some great talks from some really influential people, just for people to listen to.
And it's not just food. We've got, obviously, the office is where coffee happens, right? You've got to have good coffee to keep people going. Is there anything there that needs to be re-looked at nowadays so people don't go around the corner to the Starbucks? And do we want to prevent them doing that? What's the... Claire, maybe you can jump in here from a Sodexo perspective. What's
Coffee.
Coffee.
Coffee is so particular.
Everyone likes their way.
For me, as long as it's good coffee and it's not in a reusable cup, then I'm happy. You know, so for me, it's very much the experience. I think I went past a Starbucks the other day, and I actually went in, and they managed to get all their cups are all on the pavements, and they were like, "Well, it's not my problem." And I was like, "Oh, it is your problem, because everyone's recognised that they're your cup lids," and the amount of people that I've just seen taking pictures of it. So I think coffee has a story that you can weave into it, whether it's sustainability, whether it's a social element. There is lots of great coffee moments.
Perfect. And I'd love to, we've talked a lot about attracting and retaining talent and using food to keep your staff and attract the best staff to make sure that we push our businesses forward. And equally, the boomers versus zoomers. There's a lot going on here, and I'd love to understand from you, Ali, what we were having another chat earlier about this, and how important that is in terms of where should we be focusing, keeping our current staff happy, keeping the next cohort happy. How does that work and play out?
I'm just trying to think about how do we bring food experience together, and now you've added a third dimension called Zoomers. That's pretty cool, actually. Can I do something completely off script?
Why not?
Okay, right.
Didn't know we were on script.
Okay. Yes, actually, it's not a script at all, because that was
I'm keeping
an
you on your
interesting
toes.
question. I was going to talk about coffee, actually. I was going to tell you about the CYP-A12 gene and how 50% of the world's population reacts to the half-life of coffee, which is about 7 hours in less time. And therefore, all this advice that you've been getting around, don't drink beyond a certain time, it's not one size fits for all. And when you think about your experience with Facebook and TikTok, it's all super personalized. These companies know so much about us just by these applications that we use. Why do not our employers know about us and support us in a way that we deserve? And younger people are, to your point, Linda, so much more aware of this. Their expectations are completely different. So keeping off, completely off script. Last time I did this was actually a long time ago. So I want you to, I'm not going to say close your eyes because you're all standing up and I don't want you bump into each other. But in your mind, take out, and we're not going to do, we can't do brands, can we? Right, so we're going to say brand-free nuts, peanuts.
Okay.
Right, small bag, open it up, put it into your hand. Can somebody just shout out how many peanuts just came out into their hand that they're going to put in their mouth?
Not enough.
8. Okay, we've got 8. Anybody got more than 8? Can anybody fit more than 8 peanuts in their mouth? 20. Wow, 20 peanuts. We're going to have a chat later. Right, okay. So the point is this. In the other hand, I want you to put 1 apricot. Right? Now, however many peanuts you got in this one and however many apricots you got in the other hand, it's about a similar level of calorific content right there. So if you put a bag of peanuts and putting the calorific content, what we learned was not telling them something as blatantly obvious, but actually giving them a comparable alternative. And so when you tell people, as human beings, we like to be compared. It's an innate part of what we are as people, because how do I compare? And you've got to make it comparable to, for example, of me as a person in my team. The number of organizations that ask me, right, thank you, this is great. Can you benchmark me with my competitor? Well, first of all, I'd never tell you it was your competitor. We can't break data law. But more importantly, don't worry about them. Worry about giving a comparable output to the people that matter. Age, demographic might matter, and so forth. So I think if we start thinking more laterally than literally, and we can use the food experience at work to try to get our employees to think differently, I think that might go a long way forward.
Interesting. That's a really good point. How many peanuts, guys? 5. So we are getting near the end of our time, so please think of a couple of questions and I'll come to you in a moment. But Claire, going back to what we were talking about on the sustainability side of things, we've already touched, we know it's important to young workers. I'd love to understand, kind of hopping off on what you just said a moment ago, the labelling and calorie labelling. We all understand what a calorie is. How many of us actually understand what a unit of carbon is? Hopefully it's not going to be too long until we get to that point. But yeah, where are we at with carbon labelling, and do you think that's going to be important in the office setting in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, I think carbon in itself is quite complicated because they talk around carbon equivalents, because fundamentally it isn't just carbon, it's quite a few greenhouse gases. So therein, I've just lost most of you in the room, haven't I, just saying that. Oh, here she goes. And that is a bit of a challenge around sustainability. A lot of it is around data, a lot of it is around science, and a lot of it can be really, really boring. So how do we make sure that we keep the consumer with us? And that is fundamental. And that's when carbon labelling comes in. If it's just, oh, this is X carbon equivalent, you're like, well, what does that really mean? And I like the comparables, because I think for me that helps then the consumer to decide whether that's something that's important to them or not. And when you look at lots of different products, food and food systems are actually significant greenhouse gas emitters, and they do need to be focused on. At the moment, everyone's talking around electric vehicles, sorry, Toyota, and they're also talking around renewable electricity, which is great, but fundamentally, food and food systems needs to adapt for us to actually really start to reduce our carbon emissions. So allowing our consumers to firstly be aware of that. I don't think the government nor the media portray that. Enabling the farming community to be a part of that as well, because we do not want to alienate the farming community, but we also want the consumers to be really mindful about where their food is coming from, and for them to make choices.
So true. Love to open up to the audience. Got a few more questions if you're feeling shy, but does anyone have any immediate questions they want to ask our panel? Is there someone down here? Or we'll come to you in a moment. There's someone right there next to the mic.
Really interesting panel discussion. A lot of things resonate with what we're doing. We're from Smart DCC, and we have recently introduced free lunch twice a week in our office in London and Manchester. But we're using Fooditude because we don't have a restaurant, and we're doing it as a trial. So we're doing about 80 to 100 covers twice a week. But we would be really interested to know if there's any kind of stats around what other companies have done, and has it improved, A, the attendance into the office, and B, any measures of productivity?
Anyone got any stats? Or Linda? Or if not,
I was sitting here quite
any
relaxed,
anecdotes,
actually.
maybe?
I was thinking one of my esteemed panel members would pick this up. I don't have any statistics that I can sort of mention here now. I think what's interesting, though, is what do we mean by productivity? I think we in the UK we are predominantly a knowledge sector, and I think this question of productivity has been going on over and over and over again, because it would be difficult. It's a case of great initiative, because you want to get people back, give them some good food and what have you. But then how do you measure, invariably if they're sort of in an office and not knowing the sort of the tasks that your staff will be doing? So they writing reports, so they answering telephones, or they addressing emails, etc. So have they answered more emails as a result of that sausage and mash for lunch, etc.? Or on the day you didn't provide the food, they answered less, and it becomes very, very subjective then. So it is difficult. And therefore, it comes back to, I suppose, the happiness factor, which is the most important factor. Because if you have a happy workforce, do you know what? Invariably, they're going to be more productive. So whatever it is your company does, whether it's producing stuff, servicing the sector, etc., they will be happier, and therefore it is a better environment. So it's difficult, and therefore you can measure productivity by less number of people leaving, more applications for every job advert that you put out there, because they want to work for you, etc. It's such an intransigent thing to actually say that is what productivity is. In a manufacturing plant, easy. How many things have you made? Delivery company, how many things have you delivered today, etc. But in that knowledge sector, it is increasingly difficult to say, today we have been productive because we sent out 9,453 emails. What have you? Were they all important? Do they make a jot of difference to the world? it's difficult to put, but to me, your measurement should be the happiness of your staff.
Any additions or next question?
I think I better say something, given our website actually says we measure productivity.
I knew you should have answered.
I love how you deflected straight onto Linda as well.
No, but it's a really good point. I think what we know from various companies is they have their own definition of what they think productivity is. We spent 3.5 years figuring this out. And if anybody wants to know the real science behind it, that gentleman over there, Dr. Richard Cho from King's College London, he's on my advisory board. And we're going to the depths of understanding what does productivity actually even mean from a longevity and a happiness perspective as well. The number of times I speak to Richard and never get a word in edgeways unless we talk about happiness, it's phenomenal. And it's true. So some organizations see hard ROI. They want hard ROI. In fact, to your point earlier, the cost, the opportunity cost, the opposite of ROI is actually COI, the cost of inaction. Because if you don't act, something's about to happen either way. So can you measure that? So we've tried to make a science of this and put a number on it. What we found when we looked at a study-driven approach to this was that, yes, you can't compare widgets in this particular industry to emails in that one. That's not comparable. So you've got to go down to the baseline. And what we found was, as human beings, we have certain factors that affect our ability to perform to the best of our personal, subjective ability to be where we can be. So what are they? Well, they're things like health, culture, engagement, satisfaction, how you actually engage with people around you, including your manager. One good manager will make or break a business. One. That's all it takes, right? The numbers, we have got some amazing numbers behind that. And so when we started to measure this, we actually found there was 150 factors that you needed to truly measure in order to understand whether people were delivering to their peak. That's personal productivity right there. And we have a responsibility as employers to be able to support them in that. And in fact, what we found, it's a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio. 1/3 comes down to the individual person's own personal behaviors. They are in control of 1/3. 2/3 is down to the work conditions. So if you're offering, and it's brilliant what you're doing, I would love to learn more actually from you. And if I can come over on one of the 2 days, I love Fooditude. I think it's brilliant.
Super. We're nearly out of time, but we did have another question here.
Hello, everyone. I'm from Scout Consulting, and my question is about the intergenerational challenge. Because obviously you mentioned the curse words, the M word and the Z word, millennials and Generation Z. And it feels that all the change and now all the, for companies, they are trying to cater to those generations to make it more funky, more just to, bring the talent in. But we work with teams, and what I see in my experience is that yes, you have a great office, you have great coffee, there is a flat white available for free and non-stop for everyone. And yet it seems that the leadership team or the older generation who is running the company or the teams, they still see the Z and M word as a curse word, and they really just push they're doing it like this. And why they want to work from home? Where is the flexibility? We work hard, we want that, bring them back to the office. So my question to you is, yes, let's make it funky, let's provide the flat white for free, but how do you drive the change with the current employees and perhaps with your leadership team that is not necessarily as forward-thinking as you are on the panel? How do you make the change available in the company through your current people?
How do you make that change from the top down?
Exactly, with the senior, exactly.
How do you get the senior execs on board? Go on, James.
I observed something a couple of weeks ago which I thought was absolutely fantastic. So I'm working with an organisation to help them understand the true power of food, and it was the CEO of that company, and they came downstairs, they came to the staff restaurant, they picked up a tray, they put their food on it, they said thank you very much, and they went and sat down with just some random people they would never ever have connected with. And that's the way of them fully understanding, and all the senior management team understanding what all of their employees they would never have contact with really want. And it gives that employee the opportunity to communicate to them, feel valued, feel listened to, and gives them that route in directly over food, which sort of breaks down so many other barriers to really find out what are your problems, what are your challenges, and then they can make those changes. And I think it sort of answers your question, but I think for me that food element sort of crosses those boundaries and gives that opportunity for more communication, and it helps education bottom up, top down, and it's just about getting people to mingle, to eat together, and I think that was a really good thing for me to see, that they're really seeing the value of food, but actually, using it. I think we find in some organisations that we probably work in that C-suite don't use the same facilities as everybody else. And that's where that problem sits, because they never understand it, and they're the decision makers. They never understand what the real true why they want a flat white. I don't like flat whites, And I think you make a really good point. But my observation was it is being looked at, and it's about convincing that C-suite to come and sit with everybody. That would be my thought.
Yeah, please do.
I think we have to be careful as a nation. You have an absolute valid point. Because I think this generational thing is very, very divisive. And media love it. And companies are using it. Oh, if you're that age, you're that. And if you're that age, you're that. I can assure you, you'd all be shocked if I told you how old I was. I'm not going to tell you anyway. just be shocked. Because I do not fit that box at all. And so therefore, when people say, oh, woman of a certain age, that, I'm thinking, that's not me. You have not described me. So therefore, it comes back to the fact that we're all different. And I don't like it when everybody goes, oh, baby boomers want that, Generation X want that, millennials want something else. Do you know what? We're all human beings. And invariably, if you were, in that sort of wonderful film, The Freedom Writers, what have you, drew a line down the middle of the room and put younger people on one side and the older people on the other side, and you sort of came up with the core characteristics of what it is to be human, we'd all walk up to the line. So we have got to keep on using these boxes and causing this divide where people all of a sudden start looking at people and going, oh, well, you're a millennial. What do you know? They're a human being, and they've had their own experiences and they've got their own viewpoint, and they should be respected. I'm a person of a certain age, and I'm in a different box, and I certainly need to be respected and trusted and what have you. But let's have a conversation, because what happens, I'm picking up on your point, James, is, the C-suite. So the people in the C-suite are thinking, why is everybody now having a go at us? So you need to start bringing the discourse together and getting people around the table. Absolutely right. Food's a wonderful thing. Around the table, jam donuts. Let's have a chat about life and what have you, because we want a good life.
Food could be the great leveller.
It is a great leveller.
That seems like a good point to stop on. Our panellists hopefully will be staying around. I know a few of you had a few questions, but I think we have to wrap up. Just in order to take you off the stage, I'd love to take one takeaway away from you. I always like to end on a future-gazing question. So what do you think the future of the office is going to look like 10 years from now? Claire, can I start with you?
Okay. What's it going to look like 10 years from now? I think sustainability would be much more obvious and very much holistic within all the decisions being made. And I think that we'll have to continue to see an adaptation of the office, more renewable, more solar panels, much more sort of looking at what the sun's doing that day, and getting excited about how much we're then putting back into the grid. I'm sure some Saturdays who have solar panels are actually doing that, Harpreet. So I actually think in 10 years, which is actually not that far away, I'd like to see that we're meeting commitments that we've made, and then you're starting to make more and more commitments, and people can be really proud of those achievements. So that's for me is 10 years from now.
Excellent. James?
You've asked a really horrible question.
Also in bracket, the positive, I hope.
A positive. Look, I think here is a really good example of the mission of what you want to do and how you want to make a space collaborative, multifunctional, serving great food, getting people together. And I think there's, I was invited in a couple of weeks ago and quite happily just wander in. I don't work for the organisation. Please take some space. You're more than happy to work there all day. And I think that is how we're going to work. I think law firms will probably share with law firms, under Chinese walls and everything else. But I think there's going to be more collaboration between different companies, which I think can only be a positive thing.
Linda?
What will the office look like in 10 years' time? It will look like as it needs to look. Obviously, was that an easy cop-out? I had a wonderful conversation with Julie earlier, and I know Sean. And you said you changed this place around a year ago. Well, I came to Sodexo's offices a few before then, and it was different then. And you have evolved, because it is now the place which is right for the time, for the place, and for your people. And therefore, the office in 10 years' time will be right for the people of that generation and of that time. There's the answer.
Ali, how do you follow up from that?
To take a deep breath on that one. We're going to have hoverboards, and we're, look, you cannot call this. This is really, really, really difficult. But what I would say is, there's work from home, there's work from office, there's something in the middle that we won't talk about. And there's WFR, that's my club. You're all welcome to come and join working from a resort, preferably somewhere in the Mediterranean.
Perfect. Working from the Mediterranean in 10 years' time would be pretty good.
That's it.
Yeah, a couple of days a week. Super. Well, thank you all so much for your attention and for being here tonight and listening to our amazing panel. Can you please join me in a round of applause for these fantastic people? Thank you.